So, I am off to the supermarket once I've turned around the drive, because my husband's parked his car in a funny place, to get some ingredients for some blackberry, orange and apple muffins I'm baking. And whilst I am baking those, I'm going to be doing a review of Revolutionary Road by Richard Yates, which was written in 1955. And the reason I'm combining it with my cake baking, hi by the way, because I choose to bake cakes as a way of relaxing. Because I work full time. So for me it's a bit of a luxury to be at relaxation. So at the time that Revolutionary Road was set, we are talking about 1950s America, so we're just post World War II, at the beginnings of the Cold War, when communism was, or being a communist, was the worst thing imaginable in America at the time. We've also got the historical backdrop of men coming back from the war and needing to go to work, needing to have jobs to go to. And of course what had happened in the war is women had taken on a lot of those jobs and were out of the home working. So 1950s America was an extremely conformist place. And women's magazines of the day, which were edited by men, let's remember, really pushed the idea that a fulfilled and happy woman was one who was in the home, having babies, making cakes, cooking dinner for their husband. And these same magazines presented career women as neurotic. So this is kind of the background of, or the historical backdrop of Revolutionary Road. So I'm just about to get to the supermarket now. So I will pick this up again when I'm back home. Hi again. Okay, I'm going to start making these muffins now and talk about Revolutionary Road. The novel is set in 1955, and it focuses on the hopes and aspirations of Frank and April Wheeler, who are a self-absorbed couple who see themselves as intellectually superior to their neighbours in the Revolutionary Hill Estates, which is a suburb of Connecticut. The novel opens with April starring in an embarrassingly bad amateur dramatics production of a play called The Petrified Forest, which is also about the same thing that the novel is about, which is about escaping a dead-end existence and pursuing your dreams. This disastrous play leads April to suggest to Frank that they rekindle their dreams to live in Paris, which is what they originally were going to do when they first met. And then April got pregnant, because obviously there wasn't the contraception around then, and they gave up on their dreams at the time, and obviously her getting pregnant meant that they got married, they had to get married, they felt like they had to get married, and Frank felt like he had to get a proper job. So he applies to the firm that his father used to work in. I mean, it's interesting that what April wants to do is she wants to go out and work. And she feels that by moving to Paris, she can do that. And I think it just shows how entrenched the dominant view was at the time in America, that women should be in the home and should be fulfilled by being in the home and bringing up children and looking after their husbands. So she doesn't see herself being able to go out to work in the US, but she sees herself being able to do that if they move to Paris. Of course, she's heavily influenced by Frank, because Frank travelled to Paris during the end of the war. And he lived in Paris for a while as well. I think he might have lived in there after the war as well. And he's talked up Paris ever since, because he was quite taken with Ernest Hemingway. So April sees Paris as a way to escape this stultifying boredom of suburbia. And she proposes to Frank that she'll go out to work and earn the money, and he can find himself. So initially, and in part one of the book, this revitalises their marriage completely. And you have Frank hurrying home from the office, getting away from the office as quickly as he can at the end of the day, so that he can come home, and then him and April put the kids to bed, and then they have long evenings talking about their plans for Paris. And they plan to go in the autumn. I think we're in June when the novel opens, and they plan to go September, October time. So to begin with, it seems like, you know, they're going to actually fulfil these plans. April even gets as far as going to the passport office to sort out passports and finding out about work visas, though Frank actually doesn't actually do anything towards making this dream a reality. But they both immensely enjoy telling their small town friends, so the Campbells and the Givings, about this plan to go to Paris. So as the date for this proposed move draws nearer, as summer progresses, Frank begins to have second thoughts about it. He's always complained to April how his job is really boring, and he's only doing it because he has to make money to support her and the children. But around about the same time, he begins to sort of, I don't know, he begins to reminisce about his working life and the freedoms that he has from his working life. And he's then offered a promotion at work, so he's then offered more money to do a particular sales role. He's been working in sales for years, and actually that's quite funny really, because Frank is all talk and no action, so actually he's perfect for sales, but he spends all these years not trying very hard at work, and then for some reason the plans to Paris make him try a bit harder and then start thinking about, well, maybe I don't want to leave after all. And he also begins an affair with one of the secretaries at work at this time. So Frank is really going off the idea, and these wonderful chats they have every evening when he gets home, they begin to fade. And in fact, he starts staying later at work, and he starts going into town to have meals and not coming home till really, really late. And then he finds out that April is pregnant again. So she's pregnant with their third child. And Frank has to hide his delight at this, but he is absolutely delighted, because this means they won't be able to go to Paris now, and then he's not the one that has to pull out because she's got pregnant. April suggests DIY termination or abortion, and it's something that she discussed when she fell pregnant with their first child, because neither she nor Frank really wanted children. And actually, telling me in this novel, the children barely appear. And I think it's that idea of children should be seen and not heard that again was very prevalent in the 1950s. So we don't really see much of the two children. But anyway, Frank dissuaded her from having the DIY abortion the first time round, and then that's why they ended up moving out to suburbia. So she suggests again that she can get rid of the baby, that she knows how to do it. Because of course there were no morning after pill or services for women. But of course Frank doesn't want her to do that because he doesn't really want to go to Paris. So he further convinces her that the reason she doesn't want to be a mother is because of her mental ill health, and he suggests that she see a therapist instead. April, of course, knows she's discontented and knows she's unhappy, but as the narrative of the time was so dominantly homogenous, i.e. all women stay at home. I mean, only 11% of women in America, once they'd had children in the 1950s, returned to work. So, though April is discontented, she thinks it's her. She thinks it's her fault. She doesn't realise that other women are feeling like that. So she buys into what Frank's saying and agrees that she'll need therapy. But she's beginning to sink into quite a serious depression. What leads to the really very tragic ending is the fact that Mr. and Mrs. Givings, who are neighbours of theirs, have an adult son who's mentally ill, and he's in an institution. And I think it's really interesting because Mrs. Givings is the only character in the novel that works. And she doesn't just work, she runs a really successful real estate business. So again, there's that implication that the reason her son is mentally ill is because she's deficient as a mother, because she went out and had a career rather than bringing him up. But anyway, the Givings ask April and Frank if they can bring their son round for tea. And their son, John, turns up, and he basically says the things that people think but don't say. The novel ends with April basically deciding to take her own life, but what she does do is she attempts the DIY abortion, but she's now about 4 or 5 months pregnant. She doesn't want to carry on the way she is. She doesn't want to have another baby. She doesn't want to carry on. She'd rather die than have this child. And sadly, the ending of the novel is that the DIY abortion goes wrong and she bleeds to death. And And so the novel ends with the children being shipped off to various aunts and uncles, just like April's childhood had been. And Frank stays with the company and goes to work in New York. So why did this novel really resonate with me, considering it was written over 50 years ago? Well, it resonated because things are better for women now, most certainly. I mean, I think about, I was born in 1970, and I did A-levels, then I became a nurse. And when I got married and had children, I didn't even contemplate that I would have to give up my career. In fact, I studied for a degree. So certainly my generation had it much better than the generations before. When I think about my mum, she used to tell me how depressed she would get when we were little, because Dad would be away at work and she was stuck at home because she was born just after the war. And the expectation was that once you were married, you know, that was it, that your job was to be a homemaker. So that's why it resonates with me, because things have changed. But equally, things haven't changed that much. If we really think about it, women still, even though they go out to work, still take on the lion's share of the domestic chores around the house and the childcare as well. So though women are freed from the home to some degree, they're not. They're still tied to the home because the expectation is that they're the ones that will carry out all those other duties. And it's even worse in America because there's no maternity pay in America. So women who want to have children literally have to work it out financially so they can afford to stop and have children, and then they have to rush back to work. So there's a long way to go, and America's even worse in terms of that. There's no paternity leave, for example, in America. So though I would say things have moved forward, I'm not sure in terms of equality they've moved forward as we'd like. And obviously men still dominate the workplace. Men are still more likely to be in high positions than women. They still earn more than women carrying out the same jobs. And I guess more worryingly, for me, it's all tied up together. Brexit, Trump, the rise of right-wing conservatism. I almost feel like it's a breeding ground for taking us backwards, for making us conform again to these gender stereotypes that really are quite unusual as a period in history. So I think this novel is still very, very relevant, and I think it's a timely reminder of the fact that the 1950s wasn't this nostalgic, beautiful place at all. It was a place where women were slowly and quietly going mad. So I think it's a really, really important novel, and certainly it's been recognised as an important novel and has won many awards. But I still think, despite the fact it's 50 years old, it's still extremely relevant today for the lives of women today, and we mustn't go back to that time. Okay, I'm just going to finish off making my muffins now because I've been so much talking I haven't done anything. So what have I got to do? 1 teaspoon. Those are the blackberries I'm going to put in, and the reason I'm making these is because these are from my mum and dad's garden. And they're absolutely gorgeous. Okay, as promised, here are the finished muffins. They're very, very easy to make. They're just cooling down, and they're lovely on their own or with cream. Thanks for watching. Bye.